Hello.
How are you doing this evening?
Hi. Good. So it looks like we're a little early, but I'm good to start if you're good.
Yeah, yeah, I'm ready whenever.
Okay.
I'm not in any rush.
Okay. I'll share my screen. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, chapter 21, drugs, theories, yes, no, account.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you've seen the any of the other videos, um I want to start with trying to fill out this chart. So the basic the basic idea is that we have all of the theories that we covered in the first part of the course, and then we have a yes or no column, and then we have a column for giving an account of why we said yes or no. So the yes or no would just be whether or not we think the theory would approve of this particular issue. So in the case of drugs, it would be like, does this theory approve of some kind of um, a maximally liberatory drug policy, or uh, or
Yeah.
or does it reject that kind of policy? Maybe then we'd answer no, or we could answer maybe or have a question mark if we think we're undecided or
So when you
don't.
say like the policies, do you mean like more of, and I could be completely off the radar on this, but you're talking about like their like stance on like, I guess how that theory applies to like the medicinal use of drugs, recreational use, or just overall in general of drugs?
That's a good question, and we can try to specify in the account that we give what we are talking about.
Okay.
But we can try to be as broad as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we'll start broad, and if we need to be more specific, we can try to be more specific. So
Okay.
let's just try to work through it and see if we get any hangups. And
Sounds perfect.
all right. So starting at the top.
Yeah, so for divine command, I would say yes to an extent.
Okay.
And when I say extent, I would, I guess, emphasize the things that are not man-made. Like, and I'm not saying this is good by any means. I'm saying like, cocaine comes from cocoa plants, marijuana comes from a plant that's grown. Tobacco's not really a drug, but things like, I'm not saying opium's good, but it's grown, it's here. But yes, to an extent on those. I wouldn't go yes to like making meth in a lab and saying, "Oh, well, the stuff that made this is made by God, so why is that not okay?" If that makes sense. Other
Okay.
things are, God. If you're looking at the overall picture of, God created everything, He put everything here. There's a reason for everything. Then, therefore, drugs would fall into that category of what God put here.
Okay. So we can infer from the fact that it exists that um, whatever being created it would want would sort of be okay with it being used, something along those
Yeah.
lines. Okay, gotcha. So something like God made it, so it's approved. All right. How about these next ones?
So relative is relative.
Uh-huh.
Uh, Let's see. No. Um. So no, because uh, just because, and I don't know if I'm thinking of relativism the same thing, the same way as I'm remembering it, but just
Okay.
because somebody else, another group, another person does something doesn't make it okay. Does that make sense?
Okay. So
Like if it's
some
morally
groups.
acceptable for, let me put this in, I guess the best explanation I can in like real life. It may be like morally acceptable for us in society to do, and I'm talking about like drugs and like anything from like medicines to anything. It may be acceptable for us to do that, but there's religions or cultures who don't believe in medicine, who, if their child or something is sick, they don't follow those same moral principles as we would.
Okay.
I don't know
So
if that's exactly relativism or not.
so is the idea that some cultures would not be okay with drug use, and so relativism, and so yeah, by the standards of their culture, per relativism, we can't say that drug use is good.
Exact. Yes, that's pretty much what I think I'm trying to say.
Okay, so can we say that exact thing, but in reverse too? That some cultures are okay with drug use, something like that.
Yeah, we could.
Okay,
Like for example, even Christians, Christianity, that they believe in medicine to help as well as natural healing. But then, I can't think of the culture off the top of my head that doesn't do the like, I don't want to call it man-made medicines, but that doesn't believe in modern medicine. They won't do it the same way. Just because we think it's okay, we can't force. There was a was it? I think there was a TV show about that or a movie. And I might be thinking of a movie. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I want to say it was or a TV show that where somebody took somebody's kid who they were watching who was sick to the hospital and got it treatment or tried to get it treatment without the parents' permission.
oh,
But the culture they were in, even though the baby, even though I think he was probably young kid, 6 to 8, but he had cancer,
sure.
but the cancer was treatable that he had, but the parents they didn't believe in modern medicine, and they didn't approve of that, so they took him out and didn't let him get the treatment, even though it was clear as day the kid was dying. But to them it wasn't. They didn't relate to what modern culture modern society would say would be okay or morally okay.
Okay. Okay, so according to that culture, um, basically they that culture was opposed, but a culture could also be, be promoted as well. Okay.
Right.
Could we put then yes no, so because some would, some wouldn't.
Yeah, that's why I was thinking I was in the kind of in the middle on this one. That's why I was hesitant on the no at first because
Yeah.
there's two sides. It's like a two-sided kind of argument.
Yeah, with relativism, it depends, right? So yeah, I think it could go both ways. Okay. Um, any of these next ones?
Let's see. Are we able to just jump anywhere? Or you just want to keep going down the list?
You could jump to ones that strike you if you wanted.
So egoism is that like the ethical egoism?
Yeah.
We can do that one next.
Okay.
So on that one, I would say yes. And so I know because I was trying to, I was actually, whenever I was reading, I have a couple for examples. I don't know if we were going to talk about it afterwards or not, but I was actually trying to practice a lot of my like P1, then P2, then C type structured arguments, like specifically with this chapter.
Okay.
So I have some of those examples written down as well. I can always share them in the Discord. I wasn't sure where exactly. I think it's on one of these. There was like topic parts, but um, so like on mine for like egoism, I put yes, and well, I would say yes, and that's like any drugs, medicine or like recreational drugs, medicinal, anything are morally acceptable if they benefit the person or help the person in the long term run or long term effect. Is I guess is a
Okay.
better way to put it. If they benefit the person long term, then morally they're good.
Okay. Is there going to be a similar answer then for hedonism and desire satisfaction?
So hedonism, I'd look at it the same exact way.
Okay.
Because I know this is actually coming from a personal, you know, obviously from my past. That one actually kind of touches me because, a lot of the times whenever I was back in my days of, I guess you can call it being an addict, that was the main thing was the pleasure.
Yeah.
That was my pleasure. It didn't matter where, I didn't care at that time that it was illegal to walk down the road smoking. I did it because I felt good. I did it because it made me feel good, and I didn't care what people thought. So that one kind of hits the point on that one. Um,
Yeah. And you desire it too, right? So we can put a
yeah,
yes for desire. Yeah, for sure. That's that seems to be why people do drugs, right? Or
oh yeah,
those kinds of drugs at least is
right.
because it feels
And I
good.
mean, you could say the same thing for people like in states like let's say Colorado, where like marijuana, for example, is medicinal. There is people who use it for the medicinal part to relieve pain, to help with all kinds of things. So I can see both, not just for the pleasure, but for the also medicinal part of it, I guess. So not just pleasure as in, oh, I know it's bad, but I do it because it makes me feel good, but also as in the, oh, I know society labels this as bad, but it medically is a good thing for me, so I'm going to do it. And I guess is in its own way a form of pleasure. So
Sure. Well, it's not the momentary pleasure of doing the drug, but it's the pleasure that you get from being a healthy person, which the drug can help with, perhaps.
right.
Though I guess some drugs also have side effects, and that's when they make people unhealthy, right? So
I guess we can go to consequentialism next.
yeah, and
These big words.
we're talking about consequences a little bit already because we're talking about health benefits and side effects. So,
Yeah. So
what's
this
your
would be
thoughts here?
another yes and no.
Okay.
Because I look at it as in yes as the consequences of what the drugs effect has on the individual. That if it's a good effect similar to the hedonism, to where if it's good for the person as an individual, then it should be morally acceptable. But the argument would be no, as in it's wrong. You know the consequences of doing what's wrong. So if you do drugs knowing the consequences, it's kind of like one of those like where people would do something and well, why am I getting in trouble for it? Well, you knew it was wrong. Kind of, and I know this might be a kind of a little bit of unpopular opinion, but kind of like that example whenever that Grimer girl, the basketball player, got arrested in Russia for marijuana. Well, you knew the laws there were serious consequences. You still proceeded to do it, but then whenever it happened and the consequences were given to you, cried wolf pretty much. So I know that's not like the best, like, I guess, example, but to me, that's where, like, on the consequentialism side, there's good for the individual, for the consequences of the actual drug itself, but then there's consequences of doing the drug and the actions that are related to those consequences. So it's like a two-sided argument in my eyes.
Yeah. So I agree with you that there's the two sides to it. Um, let's talk about that example a little bit because I think that example is a little complicated. The reason I say that is because the particular you're talking about the basketball player who was arrested for drugs in Russia. So
Yeah,
that you're describing their legal consequences for her actions.
yeah,
Um, but we can I think we can set aside legal consequences because we can ask the question, well, should there be legal consequences? Um, and we can say maybe there should be, maybe there shouldn't be.
yeah. I
So
remember.
then,
I read that in the chapter too. That was actually one of the arguments I had. I like that you brought that up.
yeah, so maybe we can still say, well, she shouldn't have been punished because what she did wasn't that bad. Um, and we would be making a an argument that's not a legal argument because, of course, in Russia that is the law. But we'd be
Right.
making a moral argument to say, well, the Russian law is too harsh or something like that.
That is true.
Do you think so? Maybe we can give a different example. So an example might be a person who does drugs because the drugs are giving them good consequences, but the person is aware that there are side effects and maybe they are suffering those side effects too. So then we're not in that example
Yeah.
we aren't involving the law at all. So I
So I
think it's a
think kind of
cleaner
like what you're
example.
saying is, I guess, a good example of actually that. What you're saying is that GLP-1 stuff going around where people inject themselves for weight loss and they lose weight, but the side effects can get pretty harsh on it. But the people still
Yeah.
do it because they
Yeah.
get slim and they look great. It makes them feel good, but the health effects are the bad consequences. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and I think when we talk about the good health effects and the bad health effects, we're sort of purifying the case because the law could be this way or that way or the other way. Uh, the law is like changeable because we can vote it in or out, right?
Right.
Uh, so I'm trying to like isolate out if there's something bad and good about drugs, what is that thing that's bad and good about drugs independent of the law? Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We
So
can
I can
still
think
talk about
probably.
the law, of course, but
Oh yeah, yeah. But I think like on that situation, then yeah, it would probably definitely be like the negative health effects on the
yeah,
individual, the which
yeah,
would be the bad consequences.
yeah. Okay. We can move on to the next one then.
All right. So what is that? Kantianism. See, I was a
Yeah.
little. That's one of the ones I still kind of struggle a little bit with. So
Sure.
maybe we can kind of discuss that one together and help me kind of understand Kantianism a little better.
Yeah. We talked about a few different principles in that chapter. There was the principle of humanity and the principle of universalizability, if you remember those.
Yes.
So, do you think that there's anything related to uh, anything related to drugs that we can relate to those principles?
Hmm. Universability, yeah.
Okay. What are you thinking?
I feel like this kind of ties into actually a couple theories. I feel like that kind of ties into a couple of them at once. But like for example, marijuana around the whole world. I mean, almost every country there is. Um, it's something that people will smoke not just medicinally but recreationally for pleasure, such as like the desire satisfaction and such. And to me, it's kind of it falls under that one obviously universability because it's something that's I can't really say universal. I guess I can't say universability because it's not something everyone does. Um, the majority of society, I guess that would fall kind of under the social contract part, but yeah, see, I struggle with Kantianism, trying to relate this to
Yeah.
examples.
Well,
Uh,
we could ask something like, does a human being have a right to do drugs? Sort something like that, because we
yeah,
want to respect the human being as a human being, who's like a person who can make their own decisions and do things according to their own like mental uh, mental processes, right? So do we think that when we take drugs away from that person, is it sort of like violating their humanity in any way?
I would say yeah,
Okay.
because if it's something that so now I'm diving into the arguments too with I mean, if it's something that helps somebody, you can physically see it visually. If it it's just I guess an example would be like people who take damn what is that? Excuse my language. What is that stuff called? I can't remember. Xanax. There's people like who take Xanax, which is a drug, medicinal type drug, that gets prescribed to people and such, and people will take it for conditions or whatever the reason may be, and it actually helps them and lets them function the right way. So we should let them have it because they're able to sustain themselves with it. But then on the other hand, like the argument I'm thinking of in my head is, it's like Xanax, for example, is one of those drugs that get sold around the streets, and they can be abused, and it's it's something that I guess in the best way it should be regulated better. You know,
Okay.
So a lot of these things, if somebody needs something to a certain extent because health or whatever the reason may be, if it's regulated better, it could be morally acceptable. But with the chance of it doing the damage to society that it does, kind of like that train trolley thing, killing one over five doesn't mean killing that one is good. You know, it's kind of like that in my eyes. Just because somebody needs it, if we can't regulate it, then why continue providing it knowing it's going to do bad? It may not do bad to that individual, but it'll do bad to society.
Okay. So it sounds like you're trying to balance the bads and the goods.
I have a
That
habit of that.
yeah, it's that sounds a little bit consequentialist when you put it like that. Um,
Yeah.
for the Kantianism, I'll ask. I could ask a few questions. So one question I could ask is something related to the principle of humanity. So, do you think that it would violate a human right to not allow them to have drugs, regardless of the consequences? So we can imagine a case where maybe it's actually a dangerous but pleasurable drug that they want to do. Is it violating a right for them as a human to take that away from them? What do you
Yeah,
think?
I think it does.
Okay. Let's try one for the principle of universalizability. So let's imagine this case. Imagine a society where everyone was completely high and drunk all the time.
Yeah.
Everyone. Uh, do you think that that is a society that could work, or do you think that's a society that's not universalizable? Like we couldn't all be high and drunk all the time.
It couldn't work, no.
Okay, it couldn't work.
there's
It'd
just
fall apart.
yeah, there's certain things, and I guess the best way to put it is certain things in life that you got to be sober for. I mean, you can't
Sure.
fly that airplane or drive a motor vehicle, blitzed out your mind. So, you know, it- yeah, it
Okay.
definitely wouldn't work.
Okay. So let's put a yes no again for this one then, because I think we've given answers in favor but also answers against, and that's fine.
Okay.
Contractarianism we mentioned. You mentioned majority rule. Was that your
Yeah.
thought still?
Yeah.
So is that going to be what you think the people? So it would be yes, no, depending on what the people are agreeing
Correct.
to.
Correct. Which obviously, like for example, the majority of the world says crack is bad. Therefore, crack is bad. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, the majority of Colorado said medicinal marijuana is good and all that. So, therefore, it's good. But only there. I mean, it's
Okay. Okay. We can try prima facie duties. And some of these other ones.
okay. Prima facie duties. I'm trying to remember exactly what prima facie was again. Uh,
So it's the one where you have different duties, and the different duties can compete with each other.
oh yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah, yeah. That's the decision making one, right?
Uh, well, they're all decision making ones, I think. They all are sort of like ways of determining what the best decision would be.
Okay, okay. Uh, would it apply this way? So, let me try laying it out like this. So I would say yes.
Yes.
Yes, because yes, if it's structured a certain way. If that is that applicable? Like if there's certain like regulations and consequences in place, that kind of structure for it. If I'm thinking of prima facie right way.
Okay.
So
Okay.
isn't prima facie like the more like like a realistic type approach if I remember correctly? I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to
So, prima facie duties might ask a question like, you have a duty to keep your promises, but you also have a duty to make people happy. So, and you have a bunch of other duties in addition to that. So, which
sounds like my
duty
job.
are you gonna follow? What's that?
I was like, it sounds like my job.
Oh, sure, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. In that sense, prima facie duties. There's a sense of realism and common sense to the prima facie duties because we're just sort of acknowledging without further assumptions that yeah, there are all these different obligations pulling at us all the time, and we have to
yeah.
figure out what to do.
Yeah, I would
Okay,
say if it's regulated, structured a certain way, then yes.
okay. So let's try to knock these last ones out real quick. Natural law. Might this one be similar to what you said about divine command, about the things being man-made or natural and whatnot?
Yes, and see, this is one where I'm kind of know it ties directly with divine command, but I could say a yes and no on this one.
Okay.
Because I was thinking of this whenever I was talking about the divine command earlier, and it's obviously if it's natural and stuff, then obviously yes, according to divine command, God wanted us to do it. If it's here, not necessarily wanted us to, but gave us the ability to. but the just using drugs in general, I would say like violates our purpose, our natural, you know, purpose of being here. In like medicine, for example, is you know a lot of medicine's man-made. So I look at it when I think of natural, I think of without all this technology and advancements we have, I'm thinking of just natural. So
Okay.
in medicine, in certain ways from doctors, I would. That's why I say yes and no because sometimes you might be able to look at it as yes because natural is in things that were already here. We have we're more than welcome to have access to it, but when it comes into that man-made section, even if it's just creating the things that do may help us for the good without the side effects, it's still man-made. It's not natural. So I'm kind of on the bridge on that one. Yes and no.
Okay. Okay. I see what you mean about the naturalness sort of dilemma that you're pointing out. It's a version of this is actually in the book that it describes naturalness as ambiguous because different people define what is natural in different ways.
Right.
And it sounds like you're sort of recognizing that there's some ambiguity, like do am I talking about things that are like grown in nature, or am I talking about like human nature? Am I
Right.
talking about the like those together, or are we addressing them separately?
Right.
Yeah.
I
So you
couldn't sit here and tell you if, obviously I wasn't around back whenever the Stone Ages were here, but I couldn't tell you if, yes, marijuana may be grown from a plant, but who am I to sit here and say that that plant wasn't genetically engineered, which is funny, is the next chapter. Uh, who am I to say that wasn't genetically engineered hundreds of years ago by man? Just because
oh,
it looks like it's natural doesn't mean it's natural, you know?
fair enough. There are competing anthropological theories about that. Like that there's
Really?
some yeah, so I know that some of the plants that we currently eat, um, we think of them as natural, but in fact, prehistoric people were domesticating them and turning them into what they are today. So you're
Hmm.
absolutely right that that's quite possible. I know corn is an example of this, that
Yeah.
originally corn looked nothing like what corn looks like now. We essentially bred it to be the juicy, fat kind of fruit that it is
Yeah.
today.
I've heard a
Yeah,
lot of stories of like the tomatoes, pears, apples. A lot of things
yeah,
they didn't look the way they do nowadays. They weren't made the
yeah,
way they are now. And yeah, so that's another topic I could have signed up for was genetic engineering. I can go on days about that one.
yeah. All right, let's try to do these last few. We can probably do
Yeah.
them pretty quick.
So for virtue ethics, no. And I'm gonna say, I guess, try to keep this quick. Tie into both of like medical drugs and medicines and stuff, modern medicine, and even recreational, pleasure type drugs. I look at it as recreational drugs can all like they can lead to like overuse, over abusing, no self control. You know, people, they don't have a way to stop that kind of stuff. Good examples like people putting like fentanyl and stuff. And even for the medicinal part, you know, the medicinal would kind of be the only one I'd kind of be on that leaning of like the yes part, you know, because we are
Okay,
helping people with it. But overall, it would be a no.
okay. Feminist ethics.
Yeah, I'm not really the best one when it comes to that.
That's okay. We can leave that one as a
Yeah.
question mark.
Um, because I know there's a lot of things, but I know how today's day and age goes. I can't say the wrong thing because I'm a male. So,
Yeah. Well, there's things we can say. So, like, for example, it's true historically that the prohibition of alcohol was one of the things that women's suffrage led to. That we got
yeah,
women's suffrage, and then we had the prohibition of alcohol, and that was considered sort of a woman's issue at the time. I suppose you could call it,
yeah,
though that's just that's a historical incident. That doesn't mean anything about what we currently are looking at, right? But it's just an example. We can skip it though. We can just do this last one, and then we'll try to. Well, the last thing we'll do after this last one is I'll ask you what argument or arguments were most interesting you from the chapter, and we can talk about those.
okay. So for care, I would say yes.
Okay.
Uh, just overall, like medicinally and stuff, the empathy, the compassion, knowing it stops pain, knowing it helps the person, and on the other hand, regular drugs, non-medicinal type drugs, I would still say yes because if it's kind of like the desire part, if it's what that individual wants and it makes them happy and that's what they care about, then it should be morally right. So
Okay. Sounds good. Let's look at some arguments then, and then I'll let you go. So,
yeah.
of these arguments in the book, did you have any arguments in particular that you wanted to talk about? Did any speak to you? Were
So
any bad or good? What do you
so
think?
oh, excuse me, I had a burp. So I just wrote down a couple. I'm about to pull it up right now. I wrote down a couple of the P1, P2, C like structure type, kind of like what you have there. And I actually have
Yeah.
one. I have one here that talks about harm. I don't know if it's on the same exact one, but I'll read it out to you.
Okay.
Um, for P1, and this is me still trying to learn this. I'm trying to my best to like comprehend and get down this whole like creating the argument type structure like this. So I
Okay.
had for P1, if it says if legal regulation reduces the harm and improves public health, then it's morally preferable to criminal prohibition.
Okay. So, am I getting this right?
Yes.
Okay. And what were you calling this one? We can call
So
it the
I just say
regulatory
harm.
argument.
The argument of harm reduction.
Okay. And this is an argument you were writing, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is just when I was reading the chapter, I was trying my best while going through like the different parts of it to. I mean, I had to flop a couple rough drafts of some other ones, but these are like the ones I was like, I wanted to. I know last time we had our discussion, I wasn't really, I guess you could say, prepared with these kind of things. Not that I needed them, but this time I kind of wanted to do a little bit more diving in and studying before coming into this. And one to get your
Sure.
feedback on how I'm structuring this, and two, if I'm kind of on the right path, because that's my main goal of this class is I want to get on the right path of learning this kind of structure. So,
Sure. That's
um,
good.
so
So
for
what's
P2,
premise two?
for premise two, I have legal regulation of drugs reduces deaths, such as like overdose,
Okay.
and ensures safer drugs, like the quality of them. They're more regulated than like that. Well, okay. So legal regulation of drugs reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and allows better access to treatments.
and leads to better access to treatments.
And then my therefore conclusion was therefore legal regulation of drugs is morally preferable to prohibition, criminal prohibition.
All right. This is good. You're really close here to having what we want, which is a fully valid argument. So let's try to make sure that it is perfectly valid before we start thinking about it. So what we have this first premise is going to have this antecedent, the first part of it, so the if part, and premise 2 almost matches this part, but it doesn't quite match it. So if we want to be perfectionists, this is how we would do it. We would put a third premise, and we would say if, and then we say if legal regulation reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and leads to better access to treatments, then, and we would insert this part. So we have legal regulation reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and leads to better access to treatments. If legal regulation reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and leads to better access to treatments, then legal regulation reduces harm and improves public health. If legal regulation reduces the harm and improves public health, then it is morally preferable to prohibition. Therefore, legal regulation is morally preferable to prohibition. Do you see how we do you see how adding this third one made it all connect together?
Yeah, okay.
And it sounds redundant, right? But the whole point of having the valid argument is to try to connect each of the ideas to the next idea so that the conclusion follows automatically, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Did you I interrupted you. Did you have a thought?
I was just gonna say that so like the way I had whenever I first mentioned like the argument, that's kind of how I have all of mine written now. So that's one thing I'll probably do is I'll probably go back over and I guess it's like my own personal little homework because I'm gonna try to do how we just restructure that one to the ones I have and try to rephrase them. Well, not rephrase them, but just restructure it a little better because that does make a lot better sense. Because when I was looking at it and I was like looking at some of the examples from previous chapters and other students and stuff, I was like looking at that and to me, I was like, I think I'm getting it down, but that's why I did this is I wanted to be able to like say it to you and get your criticism back on it that's what helps me know what I'm doing, not necessarily wrong, but what I can improve on.
Yeah. So let's just for good measure, let's name these premises. So in symbols. So we're gonna call 2P, and then we're gonna call 3. We're gonna say that's P, therefore Q, and then we're gonna call this number premise 1. We're gonna say it's Q, therefore R, and then conclusion is going to be R. Oop.
Okay.
Do you see how? Yeah. So we have P therefore Q, Q therefore R, R.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be like what's the word I'm looking for? Shuffled, I guess. Like it doesn't have to be like number 2 doesn't have to be up on number 1 because it's P. It can be in that order you have it on the screen, correct?
Oh yeah, this is fine. If we wanted to be a little bit like it would be a little bit too perfectionist, but we could try to arrange it in order so that it flows a little better. But this is still valid, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So let's talk about, so it's valid. Let's talk about whether or not we think it's true. So let's start with your first premise. So if legal regulation reduces harm and improves public health, then it is morally preferable to prohibition. So do we think that's definitely true?
I do, yes.
Okay. Can you think of any way that we can try to counter it?
Um, yes. Am I able to use another, like a moral theory to counter it?
You can use whatever you want. We can try to apply a theory.
So I would apply consequentialism to it.
Okay.
And the reason I would say that is because criminal prohibition is a way of somebody realizing the consequences of their actions. And I know you said we don't have to go into the legality part of it, but I know like this kind of argument here was based more on, you know, actual like criminal type prohibition and that kind of line. And I'm thinking of like the only argument I can really think of is, you know, yes, even though legal regulation can reduce everything and help, and it may be morally preferable, but prohibition is there for a reason. It has its own purpose,
Okay.
and as a society, that's what we have in place. Therefore, it needs to be followed.
Okay. So there's a there's a way that I'm thinking of this. Maybe this is what you're getting at. And the way I'm thinking of it is, what if we ran a study, and the study like compared societies with prohibition to societies with regulation. And what if the conclusion of the study showed that prohibition actually reduces harm more and improves public health more? So prohibition actually was better at both things. Would
Yeah,
this would a study like that disprove premise one?
100%. Yes.
Okay. So we can propose, we don't know if any such study exists, right? But we're just
Right.
thinking hypothetically, a study,
Right.
and it shows that prohibition works better, and then maybe we could become prohibitionists because we read that study. But until then, maybe we can be like, well, we think regulation will reduce enough harm and improve enough public health, so we don't need to do prohibition, something like that.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds that sounds like it could be something something to consider. So let's try to find a counter for number two. So let's see. Legal regulation reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and leads to better access to treatments. So we think that's probably true, right?
Right.
Because that's what the regulation's trying to do. It's trying to do all those things. So I guess, could we say, what if there was another study and it showed regulation is bad? Not that we believe that that study exists, but
Right. But that could be the counter to it.
that could be the counter. Yeah, somebody shows us that study. All right. What about number three? If legal regulation reduces deaths, ensures safer drugs, and leads to better access to treatments, then legal regulation reduces the harm and improves public health. What do you think about this?
We could put the same thing another study shows, but no, let's see.
Maybe.
That's- Yeah, I didn't get this far to where I was doing these counter arguments. I'm gonna add that to my little personal homework. Make my mind think a little more on these.
That's okay. Well, that's why I invite you to talk
Yeah,
to me about it.
I'm trying to think.
Well, let me ask you this: is reducing deaths a reducing of harms? Like, is death a harm?
See, that's I guess a good argument because some cultures and some people, they believe death is a good thing. That it's their time to go, their time to be in the afterlife. So would that necessarily mean good? I mean,
We can also ask, so ensuring safer drugs and better access to treatments, is that an improvement in public health?
could we do a counter? Is in saying, and obviously I'm going to use study as another example. Like, let's say a study showed that better access to treatments shows only shows prolonged return to the use of drugs. Not that it's true, but all a study shows that all having a better access to treatments is prolonging the inevitable. I guess is the best way to word it.
Okay. So something like this, treatments prolong the addiction, something like that.
Right. Kind of like that famous saying, "Once an addict, always an addict," which obviously in my case is not true, but the I
Okay.
guess the stigma on it. Let's say for the sake of the study.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So those could be counters. It sounds like for most of these, we don't totally we don't totally buy the counters. We'd have to be convinced of these counters. They're not very strong, I would say.
Right.
Yeah. That seems, because it does seem true that death is a harm. It does seem true that regulations help, uh, and it also kind of seems true that regulations might be better than prohibition because prohibition is so uh,
Cruel.
intense. What
Yeah.
did you say?
It's cruel.
Cruel, sure.
Been to
Prohibition's
jail one
cruel.
time and it was not fun.
Yeah, but regulation is sort of like the good parts of prohibition, but without the cruelty or something like that.
Right. But similar to what I was speaking about earlier, like I've known people, hell, my grandma, before she had the dementia real bad and went to the damn nursing home, she was prescribed, can't remember the name of it. It was like a very low dosage of Xanax. And in my eyes, it helped her with the problems she had and it was good for her because it was regulated. But on the other hand, somebody I know, I'm not gonna speak names, got addicted to Xanax. And they bought it
Oh
from
yeah,
whoever, whenever, and whenever I saw that person doing it, all I could think of is, yeah, this stuff needs to be off the streets. But in
yeah,
my mind, I knew I couldn't. If I took that drug away, my grandma wouldn't have the pain-free help she needed. But just because one person was over abusing it and not following regulations, then it made it. One bad apple ruined the crop.
sure,
A lot of theories
yeah,
I can apply to drugs.
yeah. Well, we've already actually sort of exhausted the hour, so
Yeah.
I don't want to keep you any longer. Um,
Sad the
it,
other person didn't show up. I was hoping for a two-way discussion.
oh yeah, that's the just by the nature of it's just sort of by the nature of the thing, it seems like most of these discussions end up being one-on-ones because it's sort of like a flip of a coin whether the second person shows up. So
That or they see me already in here and they just think, well, he got it.
Well,
Yeah, I like having those discussions. I mean, there was one time, like a week or two ago, I saw you in here with somebody, and I saw on the D2L that there was supposed to be two people in the class, but there was only one.
yeah,
And if I was a little bit more versed on the topic, and I do have stage fright, and when it comes to things that I'm not well prepared on, I don't really like to speak on them. But I almost did. I was very close to clicking on the channel and just hopping in and popping in and saying, "Oh, I hope y'all don't mind," but
oh, I
I might.
probably wouldn't. So I probably wouldn't
Well,
mind.
even if it's just to be,
So
a passerby just sitting there observing. I mean, I
yeah,
like to, I like to see other people's outlooks on things because it's kind of like my tech class. I'm the tech class I'm in right now, tech and business, right? And I'm having an issue to where every time I get paired up with people to review my paper, nobody reviews my paper. I mean, it's been every paper so far this semester, nobody's reviewed mine, and I'm having to go off of either tutors online or the own professor's feedback for me. And I'm doing it for everyone else I'm required to. And I even voiced
yeah,
my opinion to my professor. I was like, it kind of sucks because one of the things I like the most is criticism. I like the feedback. It helps me learn. And obviously it's great to have it from the professor. Who better than the master? But I like to see other students' perspectives, and I don't want them just to hop on my thing and say, "Oh yeah, you typed this good job," and leave it at that. No, I know I did stuff wrong because I know this was a
yeah,
draft, and I know
yeah,
I left things wrong for a reason because I want it to be caught. Like, but you
yeah.
can't lead everyone to that pool of water. So
That's sad. I'm sorry to hear that. To be so
okay,
between you and me, that getting feedback from people is one of the hardest things. It's
yeah.
if you find somebody who actually does give you quality, honest feedback, that's a good friend. Actually,
Oh yeah.
you found somebody who is willing to do something that most people are gonna try to shy away from. So
That's my
yeah,
boss right there. He's pretty much stepped in my life ever since I met him as my father. I mean, he knows my father was, no good. Mother left me when I was young. Had a bad relationship with both of them. So I mean, my boss, he'll be quick to tell me when I'm messing up. He'll be quick to correct me. He's taught me, everything. I was a Wingstop manager before I met this guy, and here I am working as that pretty much top of the chain of the safety department for this company, and well dressed, well spoken when it comes to a lot of the work things. I hold quarterly meetings. I mean, for my age, I make a lot of money for my age, and but at the same time, I hold a whole lot of responsibility, and that's one thing I was never prepared for in my life was just kind of being thrown to the wolves with it.
yeah,
Whenever I got the job at this place, I was a purchasing guy. I just ordered inventory and kept track of it. And I was there 3 months, and then the executive team and my boss came to me with a whole new contract, asked me if I wanted it, and it was for this safety thing. And I had to explain to them. I was like, "Y'all understand? I don't have a degree for this. I don't have schooling. I'm just some tattooed kid that everyone avoids." And they were like, "Well, you're gonna go to school," and that's my boss told me. He was like, "You're getting this because I'm fitting you in school. This wasn't even my choice." I mean, I was I don't know, we're running close on time, but when I was in high school, I had four scholarships lined up for me for audio video production. I hosted the school announcements in Dickinson for 4 years, and I did all the
wow,
football games, the prompter out on the field. I did a whole bunch of stuff, and I had scholarships out the ass. And on my senior year, when I was 20 years old, well, 19, no, 20 years old, I was about to be 21, because I went to eighth. I mean, I was in eighth grade 3 times, so I was a late high schooler. And my senior year, a freshman tried to fight me, and even though I didn't put a finger on him, the cop told me that it was my fault because the kid didn't like me, and because of that, they ripped all my scholarships from me. So it was at that moment, I was like, I'm not gonna go to college. I can't afford it. They took my scholarships from me. I have nothing else. So I went
that's
to a
rough.
Wingstop. I mean, and then I went to a Wingstop, and that's where I spent 6 years until my
Yeah,
boss found me. And this man literally scraped me off the side of the road pretty much, and gave me access to a great job and education, helped me push through it. I mean, the days I'm feeling like there's nothing left in my life because I'm overwhelmed. I have too much going on. He pretty much teaches me how to be a man. I guess is the best way I could say, to just suck it up, keep going, and I have a family I got to provide for. I got a roof over my head. I got a job I got to do, school I got to go to, a grandma I got to take care of. I'm her guardian in the nursing home. I mean, got a whole bunch of stuff on my plate, but that's the one thing that man has taught me is to not give up, and I'll give it to him. I mean, it ain't easy, but
Well, that's right. I guess keep it up.
oh yeah.
I'm not sure what
Hey,
else
like
to
I said,
say.
feedback is my biggest thing, and he's taught me that is feedback is what matters, and nobody's ever gonna succeed in life not being told where they're messing up, and that's why
Yeah.
that's why I came to you last time, with my emotions about how I'm feeling, how I was struggling with the class, and not to say I'm doing much better now, but I'm trying my best to improve. I mean, I'm spending damn near every hour I have outside of work that's free, trying to study, trying to comprehend this, even if I don't use ethics in my life at any point. I mean, not saying I won't, but even if I don't, I want to understand this. And that's why I came to you. And I do appreciate you talking to me that day and giving me the feedback you did. So,
No problem. And regarding that, I think that as long as you're making decisions in life, they will be that's just sort of what thinking about ethics is, right? Is thinking about what's the best thing to do.
of course.
So I do think that's sort of the one of the catch 22s, if you will, is that you almost can't avoid making
Yeah.
making ethical decisions, even if you're not intending
Yeah.
to. So
It's like when people say, I ain't ever going to use this math in my life. Well, little do you know, you use math every day. So,
maybe so. All right. Well, I'll let you get back to your job and your family and all that stuff. So
right.
thank you for the conversation.
No
I'll
problem.
talk
Thank you,
to
Mr.
you
Barta.
at the next one.
Yes, sir.
Bye, Raymond.
Bye.